Hello and welcome to the Media Play News Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Parkman.
And I'm co-host Charlie Sholey.
Today we'll be leading with the ongoing writer strike happening in Hollywood and what its effects could be if it continues. We'll follow up with some big movies that have just made their debuts on streaming, having completed historically successful runs at the box office. Stick around to find out what those movies are. And lastly, we'll wrap up things with an update on another keystone of home entertainment, gaming. Let's kick things off with what we've been watching since we last recorded. Charlie?
Not too much, in spite of doing monthly recordings now instead of weekly. It's been pretty light just because of how busy I've been with wrapping up all this home renovation stuff that I've been doing. But as I just showed you, it's officially done now.
Yeah.
So now I celebrated with a little bit of used DVD shopping therapy. I went to that book off store that I've mentioned before and picked up a couple Wes Anderson movies and the box set of the IT Crowd. So I've just had those on kind of like in the background while I'm doing other stuff. But I'm looking forward not to watching more movies again, but playing more of that new Zelda game that's just come out that we're going to be talking about a little bit when we get to the gaming section. We also got some comments from the last episode I want to go through real quick. Specifically about the HBO Harry Potter show. So one of them said they didn't think it was feasible that this would do as well as the movies had because the young cast would age faster than the series would progress.
Yeah.
And I want to push back on that by saying, well, TV shows, you know, they can usually execute yearly seasons. So, you know, the 7 years of Hogwarts, 7 to 10 seasons of the show, it seems like they'd be able to do a lot better following the timeline than the movies would. Because like 1, 2, and possibly 3, those came out a year apart. But after that, each movie was about 2 or 3 years apart. There was also some skepticism about the production budget not being able to live up to the movies. And I agree and disagree with that. Movies definitely have a lot more money to throw at a shorter amount of stuff on screen, but flagship shows these days are getting 8-figure budgets per episode.
Yeah.
HBO especially with like Game of Thrones and their other stuff. So I think just that and the prestige of TV in general being a lot higher since the Harry Potter movies were out makes me think that yeah, it's going to have like a different feel than the movies would, but I still see this being successful.
Yeah, and like in regards to the like aging, I do think with like a reasonably managed shoot schedule, you could do it without like it being too taxing on the actors. It is difficult with child actors, because there, you know, obviously there are rules about child labor and how long they can be on set. But I still think that like it could be scheduled in such a way that allows the timeline to more reasonably like line up with the ages they're supposed to be, like the characters they're portraying are. I did have the same concern with His Dark Materials. Daphne Keane and I forget the young man's name who plays Will. But they were like, when it was initially cast, they were both like the exact age of the characters. And then in between season 1 and season 2, COVID happened. So it took a little bit to get to production of the second season. But they did not, these two actors in particular did not visibly age enough to like break it. And there is the convenience of a time jump of a couple of months in between the events of the first season and the events of the second season. So I think it's feasible. Like it's definitely one budget I'm not worried about at all. I feel like Max has the money and will throw it at it, especially considering like the value of the property. But I also feel like they could probably shoot 2 seasons in 18 months and it'd be,
I don't think people will mind. Since it came out that Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy game has grossed $1 billion. So people can forgive the show about a magic high school having characters who don't look like they're the exact age they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
There was one other comment about the interview I had with Jeff from Films at Home. If you haven't listened to that full interview in the standalone release that we did, I definitely recommend checking that out because it's at least twice as long as the excerpt that we put in with the regular episode. And speaking of interviews, I did another one with Eric Davis in the last couple weeks about the stuff that he saw at CinemaCon, including a screening of the full feature of the Flash movie coming out soon. He said it was great, like surprisingly great. And he also saw some footage of other movies like Dune 2, which I'm paying particular attention to. So if you want to hear everything that we were talking about that, give that one a listen. But what about you? What have you been watching in the last month?
I've been watching the underrated early 2000s, I guess, fantasy show, Pushing Daisies, starring Lee Pace. And it's good. It's very good. I've only watched the first season. Viewing schedules being what they are, like me and my partner trying to watch stuff at the same time. So I've only seen the first season and just started the second season. It had been on my list for a while, but just never got around to watching it. But it's all on HBO, or it's all on Max.
I keep forgetting to call it that too.
It's all on Max, so we've been watching it there. I also, in between other things, I binged all of Rick and Morty just like to have something on in the background. And then while I had heard that the most recent season was kind of a step down, I was like,
really? I thought the exact opposite.
I also thought the exact opposite. I was like, this might be the best Rick and Morty they've ever done. And I was like, this is really good. Like, to the point where I couldn't even put it on to be in the background. I would put it on while I was cleaning or something, and then end up just sitting and watching it and watch 3 or 4 episodes in a row. So Pushing Daisies is good. Rick and Morty is good. I don't know, what's going to happen going forward.
Considering they've lost their co-creator because of
and voice of half the characters.
Yeah. So they could make it work. They might not. Maybe they'll bring him back after a season. The other creator, Dan Harmon, he was working on Community before this.
Yeah.
And he was gone for a season, the infamous gas leak season, they like to call it, because it was so poorly received. They're like, please come back.
But I also most recently saw Guardians 3. And it's great. It is maybe the best MCU movie. Which, considering there are 32 of them, I still stand behind it. It's very good. I think that despite the elements of it that James Gunn didn't have direct control over, and by that I mean the decision to kill Nebula in Infinity War, did not work into his initial plan.
Or not her, the other one.
Sorry, I keep saying Nebula. Gamora. That decision was made above James Gunn's head. I also found out recently, as was the decision to put Thor on the Guardians at the end of Endgame. That was just some decisions the Russos made without consulting the other creators involved, which is why Taika Waititi very quickly ditches the Guardians when he tries to, in his Thor story. And James Gunn was like, yeah, Taika really bit the bullet for me because I did not have a space for Thor in this story. And I already had to work around Gamora not being the same Gamora. I think it works as the cap of that trilogy, and also as just a very well-written, emotionally resonant movie. You absolutely should see at least the other 2 Guardians movies before you watch it. But I don't think you need, because he did write them as hey, I got this 3-film arc that addresses different parts of a found family situation, and you can read that entirely separate from the rest of the MCU Even if you like don't watch Infinity War and find out like what the situation is with Gamora, they cover it in the movie in a pretty succinct way where they're just like, hey, look, this happened. This is what we're dealing with. So this is how we're dealing with it. And I think it works really well. I cried twice in that movie. It's good. It's real good. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. But you should watch, like I said, the first two. You could, if you want to take the time, you could also watch the Guardians Christmas special, which we talked about a couple months ago when it came out. You don't have to, but I did get sent. We'll put it in the show notes. I'll send it to Charlie for the upload. My partner found a very bitter review of Guardians 3 that was like incensed that there was stuff in the holiday special that they didn't go over again in 3. It was like, I feel like I missed out. The point of contention they brought up the most was the introduction of Cosmo. Cosmo's in the first Guardians. And while she doesn't speak until the holiday special, you get her deal immediately.
That's really funny considering how it's a 30+ movie franchise. Right. And this guy's complaining about a single half-hour long special of saying, how come that wasn't acknowledged enough in this movie?
He was mad that he had to have seen other things. I was like, this is the 32nd film in this franchise, man.
Yeah, watching 31 movies, no problem at all. Watching 31 movies and a special, that's too far.
A special that came out months ago. I don't know. It's crazy. You should definitely read it for yourself. It'll be in the show notes. But yeah, definitely see Guardians 3. Even if you're over the MCU, I think it's worth a watch. But I will give the heads up that there is some animal cruelty stuff that if you're really not cool, it's not graphic, but there is some stuff in it where it's like, hey, we know Rocket was an experiment, and this gets into how he was made. And so you're going to see animals get stuff done to them. So that's your heads up. I don't think there's any other necessary trigger warnings. It is probably the most violent, but it is a PG-13 film, so you kind of know what you're getting into. It's still within the realm of PG-13, but it is more violent than a lot of the MCU movies are. Just as a heads up. Those are my 2 heads up. It's a little bit more violent, and there is some animal cruelty stuff, but it is a well-written and emotional film.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about it other than that, which is why this week's inspiration we're drinking is Proper Number 12, brought to you by Conor McGregor, decorated UFC fighter. I remember liking it more the first time I had it.
Yeah.
Because it was initially gifted to me. And I thought, celebrity endorsed alcohol, how good can it be? Hey, actually, this is pretty good. So I saw it on the shelf earlier this week. I picked it up, and now that I'm having it again,
it's fine.
It's okay. This will be the last time I buy it, though.
Yeah. Now, if Conor McGregor wants to send us a bottle to change our minds.
Well, if Conor McGregor tells me to change my mind, I will.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that, man.
So let's move into the first point of the week. The Writers Guild of the West and East have voted unanimously to call a strike against major entertainment companies, including Netflix, Amazon, and Disney, effective May 2nd. The strike comes after 6 weeks of failed negotiations regarding the treatment of writers and the devaluation of their profession. The last writers' strike lasted 100 days and cost billions of dollars in lost output revenue. The strike's initial impact would be the end of night and daytime talk shows, which I remember getting canceled immediately as soon as this was called at the start of the month. While network and streaming shows would eventually run out of original episodes. Netflix's co-CEO expressed hope that a strike could be averted, but added that Netflix was prepared to serve its subscribers with upcoming shows and films from around the world if necessary. So after that copy, full disclosure, I had an AI summarize the existing article about the strike from the original piece of writing up on the Media Play News website. which I'll include a link to, as kind of a tongue-in-cheek nod towards some of the AI discourse that's happening in parallel with this writer's strike. Because there's a lot of negative talk and positive, but vocal negative talk surrounding like AI in the arts, where I see people saying that AI with regards to movies and TV should be banned, both from like the image generation and the writing generation side of things. And then I also see talk in favor of it, and that this is an amazing tool that people can use to help get past like writer's block and just use as something that can spark ideas.
Yeah.
So personally, I don't think it's quite there yet. If executives are thinking seriously, they can use ChatGPT to create their next pilot. They're in for a rough time.
Oh yeah.
But we can dig into that a little bit deeper if it comes up. But Charles, do you remember the last strike they had from 2007?
Yeah, I distinctly remember that writer strike. I was 17, and it was the first widely public display of like collective action I'd seen. Like I'd become familiar with unions as a concept, through what little we're taught about it in, high school U.S. history.
Oh, gee, I wonder why.
But to like see it happen and like there be tangible like results from it.
Yeah, not just affecting the industry, but a broad societal effect.
And like it had also
everybody watching TV, your shows are getting affected.
Especially
now.
like at the time when it was like, well, I'm 17, I just graduated high school, and there's like, or I'm about to graduate high school. And so like now I have all this time because you're a senior. You don't have any homework. You're just existing. You just show up enough.
No, if you have homework, you choose not to do it because it doesn't matter.
You got to show up enough times that they give you your diploma at the end. So I was like, definitely, because it was in spring as well. So I was definitely at that point. And so I was like, all right, well, I can like see how this results and stuff. And then like during that period, like seeing interviews and stuff, and seeing discussion about the previous one back in the 90s that resulted in reality television as we know it. And then the 2007 writer's strike really cementing it as like a part of television culture as we see it now was like really interesting. And then the fact that like it worked kind of then. But now as an adult who's been part of 2 unions and is friends with people who work in the industry and like seeing kind of how it's been impacted, was like, maybe we need to do some more of this. Maybe we should do a little bit more of this whole collective action deal. Because I'm personally, like when I was teaching, I was a part of a teaching union, and it greatly benefited me as an individual, even as someone who wasn't like actively involved in, like I was paying dues because I was in the union, but I wasn't like until like towards the end of my career in education. I did start like getting somewhat involved. Like, I went to a few meetings and like kind of understood like the workings of it. But that union negotiated a cost of living raise every year. Like that was just, and we were close to striking at one point, but then, the district relented. So I was like, I've been on that side of it as well. And the like, because I worked in special needs, that was also like, hey, this will fall apart if we don't show up. And in that case, there's like obviously a lot more legal stuff involved. And like, hey, we can't operate as a school if we don't have X amount of people supporting X amount of like Y amount of students. But here they're operating with like considerably more money. Like that's like the main motivator. And fortunately, there's also, like the Teamsters unions, like, we don't cross picket lines. And so there's like support with like in the industry. SAG is also like the Screen Actors Guild is also like in support. I found out last week that Fran Drescher is the president of the Screen Actors Guild. And I only found that out because she had some, she was like we support what the writers are doing. We're also negotiating soon. I don't think this is going to happen. It's like, look, lady, if it happens to them, it'll happen to you. Like, it'll happen to this is how this goes. It's not like AI is the only part of it. Like, that's what's being focused on, because AI is a big part of the zeitgeist right now. But that's not the only things that they haven't gotten a raise since like a couple years after the last time they strike. So I think it's like weirdly hubristic to be like, their unions facing problems that clearly resonate through the entire industry. But I think our union will be okay. I don't know, because we're like the ones in front of the camera. Like, that's not a reasonable. Like, to think that it can't also happen to you was like a weird stance to have as the president of a union. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Aside from like superhero stuff, obviously, like Disney's one of the Disney and Warner Brothers are two of the companies that are the focus of the WGA strike. And as a superhero person, obviously all these shows that I'm like looking forward to coming out are delayed now, and I don't care. Pay people. Like,
yeah. Now that you're older, you have other things going on with your life that you can
honestly.
Focus
I don't even have that much else. I really want to see Daredevil in the MCU, but that's on pause right now because that writer's room isn't working, and they're keeping people from getting on set. And I'm like, yeah, if I were part of a group that was like, hey, if we all stop, they'll have to do something, and what they'll do is probably it'll be capitulate to some of this.
Yeah, they definitely have some grounds in the sense that the TV model itself is radically different from where it was, 16 years ago, where all this stuff is on streaming. TV seasons in general are much shorter. And like the being able to depend on residuals to make a living on just doesn't work in the streaming economic model. So personally, there isn't anything I was looking forward to that's getting impacted by this at all. If Dune 2 was delayed, I think I would riot. But Dune 1 was delayed. I forget for the exact reason. I think it was like scheduling, lining it up with like other movies getting released at the time. But it got delayed 10 months, seemingly for no reason, which I took as a personal insult. But as far as I know, Dune 2 is still coming out in November. But as for everything else, I think given enough time, it'll turn out good for the writers. They just have to stick it out. There's been some hilarious, they'll just replace all the writers with AI takes I've seen. Yeah. Where someone tweeted out, you may not believe this, but this was completely AI generated. Hollywood is done. And it was a movie trailer about kind of like with a roaring 20s aesthetic. And you could definitely pick out stuff that's recognizable in it, but it is laughably not a real looking trailer. Yeah. It's just the same way that text generating AIs 5 years ago, if you asked it to tell you a story, it would sound like a child making up a story on the spot, where there's recognizable things in it, but there's no coherency. Right. That's where the video generating AIs are right now. It's like, okay, I understand the aesthetic, but this is not watchable. Yeah. If this was someone's like final project in film school, they would get like a B. Like, oh yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I see what you're going for. Yeah, I think there's definitely like space within many industries for machine intelligence to like be utilized effectively as a tool. Like, there are lots of people already who are like using it to automate tasks and using that like effectively within their role in whatever job they're doing. And I think in the creative fields, like you said earlier, there's definitely room for it to be like an effective tool for like compiling ideas, or like kicking off someone who's like maybe, experiencing writer's block, or like, any other sort of creative blocks. If there were like I've been wishing for years that there were like something I could put notes into and it figures out what key I'm playing in, because I'm bad at that part of songwriting. And so like AI, like as a musician, I think AI could help in that way. I wouldn't like have it write an album and be like, hey, I made this. Like, but as far as like a tool, I think that like anything, it could be used effectively by people who know what they're doing. In the same way that like being able to record electronically didn't ruin the music industry. Like tools get created and they can be utilized effectively. And AI is one that could be, but I think the inherent cynicism in American capitalism kind of like wants it to be more than it is in order to pay people less, or like to devalue the role that thing would be replacing. And it's definitely not feasible for a while. But if you are mad about things getting delayed because of the strike, you should be, and you should direct that anger at the studios. Because the most effective thing about a strike is that it's disruptive. If you can make the right people mad enough to do something about it, and by mad enough, I mean make them lose money, it'll cost less to fix the problem than they're going to lose by not cooperating. So last one lasted 100 days. We're exactly 2 weeks in. Let's see how long it's going to go. As of right now, from like, people I know who are in the industry and like following other people, as of right now, they're like good as far as public support goes. Like, hey, we are prepared for this. Like the whole point of a union is that we can support our members when things like this, happen. So as of right now, they're like not asking for a boycott. Like they're not asking us to not watch anything. They're not asking us to like, give them money so they can keep going. Like they're ready to, go the distance with this, but just kind of like, stay plugged in, see if there's anything that you can do. If you live near one of the studios, you can absolutely go join the picket line. Like they'll be happy to have you. And I think it's worth doing.
Yeah, I'd say that a potential negative outcome for this is studios' greater reliance on international productions.
Yeah.
So like the thing Netflix was saying about how they're fairly well positioned for this strike to happen is the fact that they're releasing like over 30 South Korean produced things in this year alone.
Yeah.
So I know there would probably be some pushback against Netflix if people woke up one morning and all their shows were starring South Koreans and Indians and whatnot. But there very well could be a greater push towards the globalization of producing stuff internationally. Yeah. Which itself is not necessarily bad.
It's not a bad thing if it happens for the sake of as much coverage as possible, because it's cynical no matter what. Like that's what it comes down to is this strike is not going to make the studios care. It's going to, if they, when they relent on whatever is enough for the union to like agree to, it'll still be selfish. Like, well, we're losing more money than it would cost to fix this problem, so we may as well do it. Though like right now, so I did see, I should have saved it. But I saw a Twitter thread of a writer who was like, I turned down this morning a studio who was like, we'll fly you to Europe to write there, because then you're not technically breaking the strike because you're not working in the, in the country. I was like, yo, we will put you on a plane right now so you can start this project. And
the fact that they're making those kinds of offers,
like within 2 weeks, is like,
that should make you think, all right, they're desperate to get around this somehow.
And the WGA does have like, one of their things, one of their rules is like, if you break the picket line, you can never be in the union. Like if you scab during a strike, we'll remember, and you will not be allowed to join the union in the future. So they're like, we're going to stay as strong as we can. Yeah, the globalization element is an interesting like factor to it, because there are a lot of emerging film and television industries around the world. And like Netflix in particular is like really big on distributing international media. I mean, like RRR won an Oscar this year. So like there's an increased globalization is a good thing. And I think it could honestly, like, depending on how long the strike goes, there will probably be a period where 6 months from now, there's just across like multiple streaming services, there's like 30 shows that are all produced outside of the US, while like all of the US shows are just like we're on a production hiatus, so they can't resume until later. So that might happen, and that could also be a good thing. So I don't know. Strikes are good. Unions are better. If you have the opportunity to join a union, you should do it. It'll work out. It works out more often than it doesn't. This is a pro-union. I'm the pro-union host of this podcast. I don't speak for MPN in this specific regard, but I'm definitely pro-union. You should do it.
All right. I'm union neutral to give a little bit of diversity of thought to the hosts of this show.
If you don't have a union where you work, start one. Talk about your pay.
And this was the last episode of the Media and Play News podcast. Thank you. I'm just kidding. Let's move on.
The two biggest movies in animation by box office gross are finally available on streaming: the Super Mario movie and Avatar 2.
Yeah, you see what I did there?
Yep. little subtle shade at Avatar 2. In Avatar's case, it will stream on Disney Plus on June 7th, but Mario is available on Amazon Prime right now, the day we're recording. That hasn't stopped some people from trying to watch it online before this point. In a story from The Verge, apparently the Super Mario movie has been posted to Twitter in full multiple times. One feature of its Twitter Blue subscription plan is allowing high-definition long-form video to be posted as a tweet, so naturally people are seeing how far they can stretch the limits of the platform. Each tweet containing the movie has gotten multiple millions of views, but luckily we don't have to go to Twitter to watch Mario online anymore, which is hilarious. I've gotten multiple emails this weekend that were like, hey, Mario's going to be out on Tuesday. I was like, I get it. It's fine. I don't need emails from everyone. Voodoo sent me an email right before we started recording, like, hey, you can buy Mario.
Yeah, I saw some ads on Twitter, incidentally, saying that it was available today. But I also found a link from a, let's not go into the details of it, type of site that will, through a series of comical circumstances, allow me to watch the Mario movie on my 3DS, which, just for the sake of the material and the platform, I kind of feel like I have to.
It's perfectly cyclical.
But I am watching it today after we finish recording while I get some of my other stuff done.
That's the perfect way to watch it as a 33-year-old man.
Yeah, I can't wait. Avatar 2, on the other hand, when it comes out June 7th, I can't wait to watch it again for the first time because I've forgotten everything about it in spite of having seen it twice already.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember story elements. I remember moments. I remember how weird all of the clone Marines look, and then you get over it really quickly. But that's just a movie that happened. It's definitely a movie that came
made, the third or fourth highest grossing box office of all time.
Yeah, whatever.
I still am in awe of that. I remember some sort of promotional message that the studio had put out saying this guy and that guy from Avatar 2 are going to reprise their roles in Avatar 3. And a response to that was, who are they?
It's like when before the release of Avatar 2, there was that whole period of Avatar revisionism where we were people were pretending to remember character names. You don't remember. Semi-related in terms of things that definitely happened and that no one talked about. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania comes out tomorrow on Disney Plus. So it's crazy seeing how quickly, we've talked about it before, but just how quickly things go to streaming. I just saw Mario. The last time we recorded this, I had just seen it. And now I can watch it at home today if I want to. Whereas opposed to like 20 years ago, if a movie came to home media really quickly, it's because it was bad. Like I distinctly remember Garfield coming out the last day of middle school, like the last day of my last day of 8th grade, and it was out on VHS and DVD before the end of summer. Like that's how it used to happen. Is a movie had to be bad to come out really quickly. It was like, maybe we can recoup this on a home media.
Yeah, there's still a part of my brain that thinks I just saw something in theaters. I'm going to have to wait 6 months at least to see that one cool scene again. I'm thinking about, unless I want to like go back and watch it in theaters again. But now it's only the really, really big money makers that stretch it out that far.
Yeah. And usually it's because they're still in theaters, like with Top Gun.
Which also is available on streaming now. I saw it over the weekend for the 8,000th time, probably.
Yeah, I finally got around to putting a television in my bedroom, and it is an Amazon Fire TV. And so it's always like, hey, you can watch this right now on Prime Video, because I keep forgetting that that's like part of my Prime stuff. And I also, again, we talked about it before, I'm subscribed to too many services. So Amazon is always like, hey, you have these channels if you want to add it up. I'm like, I don't. Stop telling me. And then I remember, and I watch a bunch of stuff from like Stars and Cinemax for like a week straight, and then I forget that I watched everything, and then I record this podcast and I tell you I didn't watch anything. All right, but moving on. For video game consoles, the long-fought console war between Sony and Microsoft may be coming to an end soon. Xbox CEO Phil Spencer appeared on the Kinda Funny XCast podcast recently and alluded to Xbox's fight against PlayStation may be a lost cause. He continued saying, 90% of gamers are attached to their consoles, and this comes off the recent report of Xbox revenue decreasing 13%, while Sony's PlayStation 5 sold a record 19 million units last year against a projected 18 million. In a quote from Spencer, it's just not true that if we go off and build great games, all of a sudden you're going to see console share shift from PS5 or Switch in some dramatic way. It's just the truth of the matter when you're third place in the console marketplace and the top two players are as strong as they are. The other video game incumbent is, of course, Nintendo, owners of the Mario franchise we discussed earlier, and just having released the next iteration of its Zelda franchise to critical acclaim.
If Xbox seriously went under, that would be wild. But I can kind of see it happen because it's not just this generation of consoles, which are like a capital M meh for me.
Yeah.
But their last generation too. Because like all their big IP that I, played as a teenager, like Halo, Gears of War, those sorts of things.
That's basically it.
They're not doing anything with them at all. Like there was a turn-based Gears of War game that came out last year. Halo Infinite came out and was famously pretty mediocre.
Yeah.
Like lots of people were saying, oh, it's a great game because it's got a grappling hook mechanic in it.
It was a great mechanic. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a great mechanic.
And it was great for about 3 months. And then it didn't have as many of the features people wanted, like a new game plus or a co-op campaign.
Its multiplayer was so weak. You couldn't select maps, and it was just a constant rotation of like seriously 3 or 4 different maps.
It was 3 maps at launch.
And you couldn't even lock down what game type you'd want to play.
Yeah.
So it was like the feel of the game was amazing, but the implementation of the mechanics or like the game itself was so lackluster.
Yeah. And like you can't really compete if you're not coming out of the gate really strong in like the first person shooters. Like we get a Call of Duty every year and they sell near record amounts every time because that gameplay loop is like they figured it out and they have 2 studios constantly iterating on it so they can do yearly releases.
Yeah, which incidentally Microsoft is trying to acquire the rights to Call of Duty.
Yeah.
And they could get it. I can see it happening, and I think that would stave off death.
It would
for Xbox for a while.
But like it's interesting, like being the age that we are and seeing the parallel of what happened to Sega 25 years ago now. not quite 25 years ago, but Jesus, very nearly 25 years ago now. When the Dreamcast was like, it was a big, they're like, yo, this is going to do it. And
I was just thinking of the Genesis, but it was like a legitimate contender to the Super Nintendo.
Yeah. But it was also kind of late to the party. It was a more powerful console, which I don't think that, the Xbox Series X and the PS5 are like, I don't think there's a huge gap between them. I think, as someone who owns both, I don't know that it's like one is considerably better in terms of performance than the other. PlayStation does have, similar to Nintendo versus just, Sega in the mid to late 90s. PlayStation and Nintendo have the stronger first party like library. They have things that you can only get there, and that people are getting consistent quality from.
Yeah, they have console sellers for sure.
Yeah,
and just the fact that Nintendo is still releasing stuff for the Switch, which is like 7 years old by this point, and people are losing their minds over it because the games are so good.
Right.
Case in point, the new Zelda game, which I'm going to play tonight, probably while I'm watching Mario and not doing my chores like I should be doing.
As Miyamoto intended.
Yeah. So to me, it's always felt like Sony and Microsoft with their consoles, they've been steadily converging towards PC level games.
Yeah.
But for people who don't want to deal with the annoyances of playing on a PC, and as a PC gamer, believe me, there are a lot of them. But they don't have that differentiation from like what Nintendo does, where it just feels like they're constantly cranking out weird, interesting ideas for their consoles. And sometimes it doesn't really work that well, and it's not well received. And other times, like with the Switch especially, they totally dominate sales.
Yeah, I think like Nintendo also has the benefit of like a diversification of ideas. So like when the Wii U completely flopped, they still had the 3DS that was until the Switch was released, and even then only technically counts as a handheld. The 3DS was the highest selling video game console, period. Like, as big as the PS4 was, the 3DS was considerably like outselling everybody. And so they could kind of afford the Wii U not delivering. And I think it like an interesting, like a very clear indicator of like the current console generations, like how unbalanced kind of the market share is like the PS5, you couldn't get them until like a year ago. You had to be on like I bought mine 9 months ago, and I was still on a waiting list to be able to buy it. Like, and I think that was part of it, was the demand greatly outmatched supply, and that kind of created a mystique around it as well, of like, oh man, I gotta get a PS5. Whereas like when the Xbox Series X came out, I bought one and like it was at my house a week, like 2 days later, and it's great. I still play my Xbox like most weeks, and like Game Pass is still like the best deal in gaming.
Yeah, the one thing I'd say they have going for them is Game Pass. But to me, an outsider who doesn't have Game Pass, it kind of feels like that is a good way to sell a subscription. Oh my God. That is a good way to sell a subscription to games, but it's not something that you get new games from consistently. It's just sort of like, here's something that you can subscribe to that gives you access to a wide library of old games.
Yeah,
it's like, I want to buy a new console to play new games.
Right.
So,
and like Game Pass does have, there are a handful of like, day one, Game Pass releases where like you get it, you can download it in Game Pass, the the day it comes out. But those are all, at least now, those are all console exclusives, which, like we said, Microsoft doesn't have a huge staple of like stuff that you run to the Xbox to go play. There's some good games out there. Like Hi-Fi Rush is a recent one that was like a very good game that I only got a couple of hours into because God of War came out. But like is a very good
on the PlayStation.
Which like the PlayStation and Switch exclusives, like their first party stuff in particular, that stuff delivers consistently and they push them very hard. I don't think Microsoft has put in as much work to promote and make sure people are aware of a lot of their first party like library. Because like you said, like they're a handful of like their tent poles, like there's Halo, which we maybe get one every couple of years.
Not anymore. We don't.
Yeah. And Gears of War, we got Gears 5 right at the beginning of the console generation. And then there is a strategy game, which like the people playing Gears of War are going to also play a real-time strategy. Like it's not going to happen. It's like that's not the same audience. So it would be really interesting to see if, Xbox goes the way of the Dreamcast and was like, well, we still have all these gaming resources. So now we're going to produce games for other hardware.
Yeah. Like the title of the article that we're like focusing on here said Microsoft was conceding the console war. And I want to go that far. But they definitely seem to be in a much more precarious position than their direct competitor, Sony, versus Nintendo, which just like goes off and does its own
Nintendo's
thing.
always going to be its own thing. Nintendo's not going to go anywhere unless something very tragic happens. But yeah, I think it's like, it's hard with video game consoles because of the price of entry, right? Like, at least with like phones are probably like the next closest parallel, but at least a phone you're using every day. Like, yeah, your phone is $900, but you're probably not paying it all up front and you're getting constant, consistent use of it the entire time you own it. As opposed to, I'm going to spend $600 on this console. And then I'm going to spend an additional $70 for every $70 to spend all at once for a lot of people. It's like, I have to believe in what I'm buying to like justify throwing $70 at a leisure product. And pretty consistently, the ones that tend to do very well are not on the Xbox.
Yeah. Remember when you were younger and you had to factor into your console buying calculus, like not only do I need the console, which comes with a controller, I have to buy 3 additional controllers for when my friends come over to my physical location and we can all spend our free time, of which we have copious amounts playing games.
I'm the oldest of 4. I did that calculus regardless of friends. I was like, well, I got to have at least one other one because one of my siblings is going to want to play or at least pretend to play because I'm an older brother and I can be a dick sometimes. But yeah, like, and even what's crazier, not to make this a complete video game podcast forever, is just like the rate of inflation where like $70 is still less than games used to cost.
Oh yeah. I'm really surprised that games cost $60 for as long as they did.
Yeah. N64 games adjusted for inflation cost $110. Like that's insane that I had more than one of them growing up. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. Like, it'll be a couple of years before Microsoft is like, hey, we're not doing it. We might see one more Xbox before they call
Microsoft Word makes enough money by selling to every company on the planet to be able to subsidize Xbox through some down years if they have them.
Yeah, we'll probably see one more Xbox. Like they'll probably still be involved the next generation, but if they don't have like something to at least make them comparable, because I don't think this Activision Blizzard deal is going to go through. They just got blocked in the UK for monopoly reasons, which at least somebody's trying to enforce monopoly laws. But if you can't make it happen in their second biggest market, it's probably not going to happen here either. So yeah, unless like they really change their like identity, not that subscription gaming isn't a like solid market. And again, they have the best subscription based like model available, especially now that it also includes like Xbox Game Pass Ultimate also includes PC games. So like Nintendo Switch Online is basically garbage.
A joke.
Like it is also only $20 a year, but like it doesn't do anything.
You definitely get what you pay for with that.
And I have for now, because I'm just trying it out, but I do have the highest tier of like PlayStation's subscription service. And like they're like, it's getting better because they're like trying to be competitive with Game Pass, but like it's still not that great. And like they just stopped supporting one like library of games. And it's like, well, why does this cost more but offer me less? I don't know. It's a weird thing, but we'll see what happens. I can definitely see in the next 5 years not having Xbox be in the console market anymore, but there still being like Xbox as a studio similar to Sega.
Sega still makes stuff, well, from like the game development point of view. Xbox will not vanish, but they could just be like an overarching, like an EA level thing. EA doesn't have a console, which would be a nightmare if they did.
Yeah, you'd have to pay to turn it on.
Definitely write in if you think this was too much video game talk. But it is home entertainment, so it's important.
Yeah, we can we'll adjust, but that's going to wrap us up for this week. You can find links to these articles in the show notes and at MediaPlayNews.com, and you can subscribe to the site's mailing list using the subscription link in the notes. You can email us directly at MediaPlayNewsPodcast@gmail.com to have your comment featured on the show, or find us on our Twitter account @PodcastMPN. If you like the show, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. We really appreciate it. I'm Charles Parkman.
I'm Charlie Sholey.
And we will see you next week.
And we will see you next month.
And we will see you next month.